Today's guest is Sarah Gilbert, known as Singing Tech on Twitter. She's a community technical success manager for public sector at Microsoft. And Sarah was a previous guest on this podcast talking about her career and how she got to where she is today. But today we're going to talk about her passion of singing opera. So thank you so much for joining me, Sarah.
Oh, no problem. I love just like sitting down and chatting with you, obviously, since we already do another show together.
That's right. All the shows.
Mm-hmm. And together, you forget, people have already shipped us. We are Sarah Me.
That's right. So. And my wife feels safe since you're on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast.
All right. Yeah.
All right. So for those who haven't had a chance to interact with you a lot over, especially the last couple of years with COVID, share a bit about where you're from, who you are, and what you do.
All right. Well, I grew up in Las Vegas. I am currently the Microsoft community manager for the public sector tech community. And what I do community management, which it's always hard to say everything that this job is, because it's a faction of marketing, but it's also, I would even argue that it's, marketing, project management, people management, making connections. It's all rolled into one. You're literally forming and growing a community of people, and that includes efforts internally as well as externally.
That's pretty cool, but that's not what we're here to talk about.
No,
so
it's not.
Today, I'd like to hear more about your story of how you got into opera.
Well, okay. So, for those that don't know, I have a bachelor's and a master's in music. I guess I can give this part of the resume. I did undergrad at Northern Arizona University on an opera scholarship, as well as my grad school as well. My grad school, I went to the New England Conservatory of Music in Boston. Ooh. So I literally went from one coast to the other. And then after that, I was a professional opera singer for about 8 years, and I traveled all throughout the United States and the world. I sang in England, Austria, Germany, Ireland, Australia even. Yeah. That was a really fun trip. And Italy. Italy was one of my favorites.
So what made you pick it? I mean, when you went to college, since you got music degrees, you knew something. What made you go into opera?
Well, for one, the challenge of performing was always interesting to me. I loved, so having ADHD, which I didn't know at the time, by the way, music was one of the things that I had a huge interest in, even from the get-go. I loved music, and it was one of the things that even though I was actually an overachiever in school, yes, I was one of those people that graduated honors and all that. Everything else just, sometimes I had to use a lot of willpower to get through, but music just always came easy. I was always big on forms of communication, and I always wanted to be heard, or to help others communicate. I was in choir all throughout middle school and high school. I loved that. I loved the community of that, as well as making music together. And I still love doing that to this day. And what actually originally got me into music is kind of a sad story, so sorry about it. Was actually, so most people don't know, I had a brother, and he babysat me and my sister Kristen a lot, and he was a musician, and he taught me how to play the piano originally. I was just like a toddler, they plunk on the keys because they can barely see over the bench like this. And he sang in a band, and he actually was quite a Renaissance man. He wrote music, he wrote and published poetry, all of that. But unfortunately, when I was around 8 or 9 years old, he passed away. And music was one of the things that kept him close to me. So that's why I originally got into it, was so that I could keep his memory close. And then I realized I loved it too, just a different way than he did. He was a singer, but he tended to, from what I remember, he favored instruments more, like guitar and piano. Mm-hmm. And then I went more the singing route. And then when I started getting individual singing lessons, I had several teachers be like, you realize your voice is really powerful. You could, because operatic training is some of the hardest vocal training that you can get. And even if you go on to a different singing career, I've known a lot of people that have gotten operatic training just to have that under their belt, because basically if you can do opera, you could do damn near anything. And I mean, how else can you fathom somebody being able to sing. Opera is not mic'd, so you have to be able to have the power to sing over an orchestra and be heard. Not easy.
Wow. So was it during college that you realized that, and then you start down that path?
High school, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I started seriously training for it maybe around 17 or 18. And the reason why I went to Northern Arizona University, besides it just being an awesome college, it has a really high elevation. So one of the things that you have to train for as an opera singer, it's probably why some people notice like I have a big, not big boobs, but like an actual like wide chest and like a very like developed chest area, is because you are developing that as an opera singer. You develop your lungs and your lung capacity. I have more of a lung capacity than the average person. Most opera singers do.
Oh, interesting. And so then the college path you took set you up specifically for professional opera singing?
It did, yeah. Being a professional musician, a professional opera singer, but it also prepared you a lot for the world. Like I've actually known a lot of musicians that have gone into tech as well. You know, a lot of people think like, oh, you went to college and you just like what, like sang over here and sang over there. And I'm like, that's not what classes are like. But I had to take, so opera, you have to learn several languages. I had to take a year of French, German, and Italian. I had to take classes in music theory as well as music history. I had to learn the business end of opera because when you start out, you're basically your own agent. I had to learn diction, which is even if you don't know how to, it's phonetic reading. So even if you don't know like how to speak a language, if you look at like the phonetic alphabet of it, you know how to speak it, even if you don't know what you're saying. So you could be a parrot. Yeah, I even took conducting, which was, trust me when I say it was quite hilarious. And class piano and performance classes on top of that, and the things that I had to do for my scholarship and perform.
Wow. So how does that transition from school to professional work? Did you have to seek out, since you said you had to learn the business end and represent yourself, was it an easy transition? Did the job just fall in your lap? Did you have to fight for it?
Finding jobs singing opera is not like The Voice or like America's Got Talent, like people think. You know, you don't just walk into a room with a bunch of like Simon Cowells or anything like that. You look for open audition screenings. Usually they have them posted on several different websites. I guess back in the day, you know, you would probably check the newspaper or postings like that. And a lot of, come to think of this is, I use this in my job now, but a lot of how you can also get jobs as an opera singer is through your connections. Because a lot of times some of these smaller companies won't be able to advertise on the big sites, but they're still looking for people and they're still going to pay. So my career started in Boston, which they have a lot of smaller companies like that, or student funded companies, or sometimes even smaller companies that coexist with the schools. Like sometimes they want to bring in professionals for like the bigger level roles, but they still want their students to put on this show, but they want the main characters to be professional level. Or in some cases, there's certain characters that in an opera that the voice has to be more developed, and somebody younger just can't sing them, or they won't have the developed stamina to be able to do it. Contrary to popular belief, opera singing is actually practically an Olympic sport, because you have to have stamina to sing a show that can last 4 or 6 hours, or even the ring cycle, we're talking 9+ hours.
Wow.
So yeah, that's being able to have stamina and to pace yourself. So how I got into work was like, I started working actually during grad school. So the cool thing about a lot of these schools, my grad school included, is they had a gig office, and companies would call them and tell them different things that they were looking for. And weekly they would start having postings of like, sometimes you would see it just really simple things like soprano needed for wedding. Or surprisingly, a lot of the work, the early work, is in churches. Church services of all types will pay to, like, not a huge amount, obviously, but they'll pay to have some professional singers in their choir so that they can sound better. Or, you know, they just like pleasant singing and they want good soloists that are guaranteed. So there you go. So I did that starting out in grad school, and then it just built from there, where different companies or different programs would ask me in.
Wow. So I mean, 8 years is a long time. I mean, what what continued that for you? I know, we in our other interview, we talked about why you transitioned, right? Opera doesn't pay as well as technology. We all know that. But what kept you going for that 8 years? Was it just a passion for it?
A passion for it, and it's something I knew I wanted to commit to. Like, I was never bothered living the, I guess you would call it, the bohemian lifestyle. Because to me, what always mattered, it wasn't about the money, it was about the experiences.
Hmm.
Like, some of my best stories and memories are from my time as an opera singer, when I didn't really have two dimes to rub together more than half the time, or had to think of creative ways to do things. And um, what is it they say? Necessity is the mother of invention. It's
Yeah.
through that I actually found out a lot about myself being an opera singer. And the fact that, like, I could overcome the challenges of being a traveling working musician, like, it made me less afraid of other things as it's come up later in life. Like, when you do go into an opera audition, for example, for a bigger company, it is kind of like American Idol of the damned, because, like, at the very end audition for some of these big companies, you are auditioning for, like, all the directors and the staff. So, like, you'll go into this room and there's, like, a really long table, or sometimes it's like a smaller theater, but then they're just taking up, like, the front row or something. And yeah, they're just all sitting there, like, writing down notes on everything you say and you do, and how you look and how you walk and how you act. It's like, that's really nerve-wracking. But because of being able to be conditioned to that, now whenever people are like, God, I'm nervous about this presentation I have to give, and I'm just like, this is nothing. It's fine. It's whatever. So,
That's great. I mean, that does kind of go into my next question. What about that experience has made you a better person? I heard a little bit,
mhm.
in that it's made you a little fearless when it comes to that public kind of interaction. Is there any other lessons that you could think of?
Oh yeah. My networking skills were made from being in opera, because a lot of how you get work, or even how you get referred, is networking and building relationships and building a community. Because, like, let's say you probably are anyways, let's say you're, like, a really good baritone, and me and you worked on a show, and, like, we had a good time, it was great working with you, you made things so easy. And then, like, I have my next job, and they're like, oh damn, we need a baritone for this role, Bobby dropped out, and, like, now we're hopeless. Like, I can come in and be like, oh, you should hire Jeremy, I've worked with him, he's great. And so, like, word of mouth, I think, in most of the music industry is huge.
Mhm.
So that building of a community in that sense, and also building up you have to build up your personal brand big time, not only just with the companies or the heads or whatnot, but with your peers. That is important. I don't know that the phrase would be like, be nice, because that implies being nice to, like, a form of being disingenuine, but, like, having a relationship with those around you. The time of the diva definitely passed, and I would never be that way. uh but building those relationships actually comes to your benefit more often than not. And I found that what was funny about that is, like, when I was doing this and I was telling my dad about all of this and how I was getting work, and he was telling, because my dad works in banking, so he was talking to me about business politics, and I was like, yeah, I could never do what you do. I can't do business politics, what are you talking about? And he's like, but you are, though.
Mhm.
He's right. So
That's great. So I know COVID has kind of put a pause on a lot of performance stuff, but what I'm assuming you're still doing this, at least before COVID you were, right?
yes, and I still do it every now and then. There's smaller companies out here that tend to do work. Like, I think they're starting back up again. There's Seattle Opera on tap. And then, actually, before the pandemic hit, I was actually talking on Twitter to somebody called the Drunken Tenor that I think lives around here. So I've been meaning to reach back out to him again too. But yeah, like, a lot of things, just because for a lot of my performer friends and performers in general, just pandemic just put everything straight pause.
Yeah.
Or a lot of companies, unfortunately, shut down. I remember during the pandemic, I was helping different friends of mine try to find grants or the relief that they could get from like even their local government, which most of them managed to stay afloat very well. And a few of them did take side jobs going into tech. And like I helped to convince one of them that I'm like, no, you have the skills that you can do this. Like, because she was even like, they're not going to take a musician. And I'm like, yeah, they will. Like,
Yeah.
trust me, you just have to, you have the skills, like any career can do this, but like, you know, with musicians, just because, you know, I come from this background, you have the skill set, you just have to apply it in a different way. Musicians have a really strong pattern recognition, for example, and that's big in programming.
Mhm.
Trying to think of other skill sets. For opera, when you are working on an opera and rehearsing it, you're literally taking like small snippets of it and working towards this larger goal. And you have to have like, you have to be able to see the big picture, and also have the stamina and resilience to keep going through and trust that it's all going to come together, which is project management. So.
Wow. Well, Sarah, I hope that things start up again and that you get to do it. And who knows, maybe if I'm ever in Seattle and you're performing, I'd love to catch a show. But thanks so much for coming on the podcast and talking about your passion.
Oh, anytime.